morning, everyone, and welcome to Primetime at the BU Library. Primetime at the BU Library is designed to celebrate the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. It's a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. Most presentations are recorded and can be found in the BU Digital Library. Please check the library news and events webpage and the BU calendar for what's coming up on the schedule. On Thursday, May 12th, join us for the original poetry reading from Angela Shannon's spring poetry writing class at 10:20 and 3 p.m. Join us for the story time in the library where students, staff, and faculty will read their favorite children's stories. Today we welcome Dr. Sarah Tahtinen-Pacheco, Anna Rubsam, and Diehl as they share culturally relevant ways of making connections with new immigrants and refugee neighbors through friendship and teaching English. Okay, Sarah, I think we'll start with you probably.
Well, thank you so much for coming today to hear about a project that's near and dear to my heart. I've been working with immigrants and refugees for over 3 decades of my life. And I'm currently working on a book that will support churches and communities in finding ways of supporting our new neighbors in our community. And so one of the things, a quote that I find just so rings true for me again and again is oftentimes we feel called to make a difference, to do something, or as in the case with I teach a Z-Tech course, a lot of students are required, right, to go out to serve others with whom we feel maybe have so much loss, have come to this country with just a bag of belongings. But time and time again, and I know students, it resonates with them as well, that we gain so much more from those whom we set out to serve. And it rings true. So in our presentation today, I'm going to share a little bit of background of what I've been working on, along with a teaching assistant of mine, Anna Rubsam, and what she'll share a little bit about what she's been doing. She's been volunteering at Landfall Village, teaching English this semester, along with a lot of students in my linguistics class. And Diehl has been working on a project with refugees and some of the trauma issues. And we know that that's really relevant and meaningful when we want to reach out to our neighbors to have an understanding of their background in meeting their needs. So a little bit of data to start off with. Today, this is from Arrive Ministries. More refugees in Minnesota per capita than any other state in the United States. How many knew that? Okay. Every year, from more than 20 countries, 4,000 new refugees arrive to resettle in Minnesota because of its economic opportunities, public and private support, and generally welcoming environment. Minnesota nice, does exist. A couple of other things. Did you know Minneapolis is home to more Somali than any other city in the U.S.? We have the largest Hmong community in the U.S., and this vacillates between California and Minnesota, depending on which year you check the data. Liberian populations in Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park are some of the largest communities in the United States. Boy, that's pretty close to Bethel, isn't it? Not too far down the road. St. Paul has a growing population of Karen, a minority ethnic group from Burma, and is currently the largest in the United States. We have a ministry that we serve at a Baptist church in Maplewood that's also very close by. There are 5 Somali malls in the Twin Cities. How many knew that? Have you been to a Somali mall in the Twin Cities? And here's just some others. I'll let you read through that, of some amazing, amazing opportunities. And I continue to see the value-added component of what we have with our new neighbors in these communities so close by to where we live and where we work are these opportunities to enrich our students' lives, our lives, and really have this value-added idea in our classrooms, of bringing the value to our classrooms. So one of the things that I've been working on is creating a guide for churches and communities to know exactly where to begin. And with this, I have some cards. If you're interested, I can give you some of the preliminary kinds of things. I trained 100 people through Arrive Ministries last month. And this was kind of where we started, getting to know a newcomer and where to begin. And so this looks at what do we do before the very first meeting? What kinds of things do you want to do to be prepared? I've also found this very helpful if you are teaching a ZTAG course or you're going out to have opportunities working in the community, in multicultural communities. So I have some ideas with that, and that's all about gaining background, learning about the culture, the geography, finding out more information. Emmy will share a little bit more information on that as well. During the first meeting is another area of making that initial meeting. How can you make that go smoothly? And what are some of the things we can do to lower the affective filter, make it feel like a safe environment to form relationships? And we've talked a lot about that, and we're gathering data about that. And we have some suggestions that we've been using that have been working pretty well for the last several years. And then during the meetings, as you develop a relationship in a program like New Neighbors, how many of you are familiar with a program called New Neighbors? It's with Arrive Ministries, and they work with churches that will welcome families as they enter the United States, and then work with them on a weekly basis to help fulfill needs that they have, get them started, and then started in English and working toward getting a job. A little story from that I heard at my training was a refugee family came into the United States, into the airport here, and there was this big banner saying, "Welcome." And the family looked around everywhere and they said, there must be some diplomat, some famous person, someone really special must be here. And then they were told it was for them, that this big banner was to welcome them here. And they had never felt that before as a refugee family. So it's just amazing the kind of experiences we have that can add value to what we do. I'm going to turn this over to Anna next, who has been working at Landfall this semester, and share a little bit about the research that she has gathered too.
Hello, thank you for coming. So like Dr. Sarah said, we have been doing some research together this semester, working on ways to really practical ways that we can connect with our refugee friends and neighbors, these immigrants who are moving here, that we have such an opportunity to work with. So one of the things that Dr. Sarah and I have been working on, since we are both in the field of teaching English as a second language, is a way for people to help our neighbors by teaching them English, which is one of the most important things that they need to do when they get here. And so we have developed a plan, we call it the Adult Language Lesson Plan, that is some simple ways to lead an English class at a church, at a community organization, at a nonprofit. And the goal of this plan is so that it can be easy enough for anyone to use, whether or not they have an education background or whether they've never taught a class in their life. So this is what we've been working on developing. And like Dr. Sarah said, I have been volunteering at the Landfall Village Trailer Park community just east of here, not far, and I teach an English class there. We serve adult Spanish speakers this semester. All of them have been women, so it's been a really fun time. And so I had the opportunity to test out our lesson plan with these women. One of our goals in creating the lesson plan was to make it very flexible and adaptable to the needs of the people that we're teaching. So it can be based around a lesson theme like transportation or food. It could be based around a Bible story. It could be based around a certain current event that you want to talk about. So it's a very flexible plan that can be adapted to the needs of the students that you're serving. In the plan, we just have 4 basic sections. First, we start with a section where the teachers, such as myself or whoever, can plan out what they want their students to learn, what the lesson is going to focus around, how they're going to evaluate whether the students have met the goals of the lesson. Then there's an activity to get the students warmed up and comfortable and talking. Then it moves into the main chunk of the lesson, and then finally a wrap-up activity to help the students recognize what they've learned throughout the lesson and then set the stage for the next week. And like Dr. Sarah said, we have been working on creating a book using this lesson plan that will guide churches and community groups towards serving our neighbors through teaching English. So like I said, I teach at Landfall Village. We have a class there on Monday nights. And it has just been really encouraging for me to be teaching there. Like Dr. Sarah's quote at the very beginning of this presentation, often we go into situations where we're serving and we think that I'm here to do something for someone, but what ends up happening is that they do something for us. And for me, it's been such an encouraging experience to get to know the women at Landfall. They've taught me so much about being resilient, being determined. They're trying so hard now that they're here in the United States to serve their families and to learn English and to do everything that they can to build a better life for themselves. And so that's been very, very encouraging for me. I'll just share two quick success stories that have happened this semester with the adult language lesson plan. There's a woman in my class who she attended the class last semester when I taught it, and she's continued attending it this semester. So last semester she just had one son, 4 years old, in kindergarten, and she every day goes with him to his school, and they have a program there for moms of children who can study English. So every day she goes to that, and then in the evening she would come to my English class as well. And it has just been really exciting to see how much her English has developed and also how much confidence she's gained. When she first came to my class, she was very quiet. She was hesitant to speak to me in English. Usually we would speak in Spanish. But as this year has gone on, she's learned more. She's learned to be comfortable in my classroom, talking with me, with other volunteers there. And so it's just been exciting to see how much we've been able to develop relationships and how much that has helped her develop English skills. The other story is of a woman who moved here from Mexico probably 10 or 15 years ago, and she has been in the Landfall community for all that time, which is, there's a large population of Spanish speakers there, so she hasn't had much opportunity to learn English, so her skills are very low in English, but her heart is just so huge. And this semester has been the first time that she's studied English. In Mexico, she had an education through about 2nd grade. So with her, we've had to start with things like how to hold a pencil, working on writing skills, just very basic things. But even she has made such progress. And I would say that she is one of the most outgoing people in my class. She is always willing to jump in and try out the activity. Even when she doesn't really know everything that's going on. So it's just so much fun. And it's been exciting to see her progress as well. The volunteers that I have in my class at Landfall Village are all from Z-Tag courses here at Bethel. So both the Spanish 202 class sends volunteers there, as well as Dr. Sarah's Intro to Second Language class. So I have some quotes here from some of my volunteers that I think are really descriptive both of how this teaching style has impacted the class and also how the students have learned what Dr. Sarah was saying about receiving as well as giving in this situation. So one of my volunteers said, I believe that the English class at Landfall incorporates an element from each of the language learning settings, which I have seen has been very beneficial. So that just refers to the great diversity within our lesson plan. We try to incorporate activities that focus on vocabulary and grammar, and activities that help students write, and activities that help students speak. We try to incorporate it all to give every learner the way that they learn best. As I'm sure you all know, some students learn by listening, some learn by doing, some learn by writing. So we try to incorporate that all in our lesson plan. Another quote says, at the beginning, Anna asked them what they would like to learn, which also changes the role of instructor to facilitator. So that's referring to the very night of class when I gave out a survey to each of my students in Spanish, asking them, why are you here at this class? What do you want to learn? And so that has guided me as I have created lessons each night, talking about the themes that they want to talk about, the themes that are relevant to their lives, again, to make sure that the teaching that we are doing there is going to be beneficial to them in their lives. The next one says, learning a second language gives you a whole new population of people to connect with that you might not have been able to before. So that I see is going both ways. We are at Landfall Village to teach Spanish speakers English so that they can talk to English-speaking people. But also many of the students who volunteer there are taking Spanish themselves, so they have the opportunity to use their Spanish skills to talk to the women. And it's been really encouraging both ways to see how language skills can help build relationships, even when the language is imperfect. I speak imperfect Spanish. The women I'm teaching speak imperfect English, but we're still able to benefit each other and learn from each other. And finally, one student said, I don't want the students that I'm helping to feel inferior or smaller than me. So again, we're there to serve as Christ calls us to serve. But as we serve, we find that we are also blessed. There are no superior people in this situation. I might be the teacher, my volunteers might be helping teach, but the women that we are serving there are just as important to us, important to our learning, important to their own learning. So I'm going to now turn it over to Emmy Diehl. She's been doing some research on refugees and some of the things that impact their lives, that impact the way that we teach them.
Well, good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma in the brain and how that affects education. And I worked specifically this semester with a woman from Somalia who was coming to the United States to escape the war that's going on there. So the supplemented kind of directed study coincides with that, and it comes out of more personal experience from my family as well. So, what exactly is trauma? Let's take a look. There's a couple definitions that I have up here. Trauma could be appropriately called a disorder in one's capacity to be grounded in present time and to engage appropriately with other human beings. Also, any time our coping resources are not adequate for the loss endured in any circumstance, or it represents a compression of survival energy that has not been able to complete its meaningful course of action. So basically, an example would be if you are trapped in the Twin Towers during 9/11 and the building's coming crashing down on you and you're walking down the stairway, but there's a line of people. Your body naturally is going to put adrenaline to run away from that trauma, but you can't run. And so that energy is compressed, and what happens is it gets stored in your body. And some of the books that I've been studying to look at how do we release that trauma that's stored in your body when it's not allowed to get out. And so looking at that, there's different types of trauma. We have type A trauma, which is basically when there's a lack that isn't met. Neglect, anything, a need that isn't met on a continual basis. Research actually shows that neglect can be more damaging than abuse because it is the absence of physical touch, it's the absence of human interaction, particularly for children 0 to 2. So that's a major trauma. Then we have type B types of trauma. Those are just referred to specific events, maybe a genocide, rape, to be more like a big type of trauma. Then we have big T trauma, which is identifiable. So something that you can connect to, that you can remember. And then little t traumas, which are just repetitive things that happen in your life that maybe you don't recognize, maybe they're under your radar. Actually, poverty is a type of trauma, a type of little t trauma. It's chronic, and studies show that it does affect your mind, and over time, it can kind of be this oppressive thing. So So, looking more specifically at what does it actually do to your brain. As you can see in this picture, it wears down on your brain. If you have patterned, measurable amounts of stress, it can actually build your brain. So that's actually good when you have a stressful situation and you're able to cope. That actually builds your brain cells. But when you have a stressful situation and you feel completely overwhelmed and you're not able to respond to that situation, it can shrink your brain because you aren't able to respond in the way that your body designed. So, with that being said, this is particularly referring to children, but at a young age, when you have an event and something occurs out of the ordinary. For example, I'm going to use an example of a hug, right? Hugs are supposed to be safe. Hugs are supposed to be natural and actually beneficial to your health. But if you have, let's say, an uncle that touches you inappropriately when you're during that hug, as a child, you're going to remember that. Maybe you have 10 other hugs that day. Your brain doesn't necessarily remember those things, but if something out of the ordinary occurs, it gets stuck in your brain, right? So if your uncle is mixing sexual touch with a hug, your brain's going to remember that as a child, and because it's still developing, it's firing warning signals to the brain of something's wrong, I don't get this, and because your brain is still developing, it wires itself into the brain. And so with traumatized individuals, specifically abuse at a young age, we see this wiring of sexualized touch with hugs, if that's not addressed, right? So trauma is a big deal because it does affect your brain. And as you can see, without intervention, without love, children literally don't grow. That quote refers to a type of trauma as neglect. And there's actually research that if you feed a child, if you give a child food and clothing and shelter, but you don't love them, you don't nurture them, you don't hold them, they literally will die. It's actually a survival need. Unfortunately, it's horrendous, but there are examples of that. So, to go a little bit more specifically on what your brain might do in response, if you have a traumatic event and a trigger comes up, your brain will go into one of two things. It might go into hyperarousal, which is when you're constantly alert and you're just on all the time. A specific example, someone close in my life, he had a traumatic experience, and I remember around the house, his sense of smell was heightened. And so he'd be like, "Where's my shirt?" And he'd be like, smelling, and he could tell where the shirt was because of that. And that's connected to trauma because it's brilliant. Your body goes into overdrive, and you have to be on and alert to protect yourself from any opposing threats. But when that trauma is done, the problem is you can get stuck in that setting. And so it can lead to lack of sleep, it can lead to just hyper awareness. The other response your brain might do is dissociation, which is literally you shut down. The heart rate actually slows down, and your blood slows from going to your extremities, so your limbs. So literally, you kind of have this, your body just shuts down. And what it is it is actually actively creating psychological distance from what's occurring, which is brilliant when you're in a situation of repeated abuse, like a lot of, or like in a situation of genocide. A lot of refugees are coming from war-torn countries, and so in that moment, it's brilliant that's what gives you the capacity to survive. When that event is over, the problem is if you keep going back into dissociation, it's going to really prohibit your ability to live, your ability to connect, and be fully alive. So, in connection to education, when the brain goes into one of these functions, it's shutting down the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for taking in information. So when you have a child in hyperarousal, that could look like, in the classroom, that could look like instigating, causing conflict, being having a lot of anxiety. Or you have disassociation, just shut down. That's actually authentic. It's not something you can work through. The brain, you have to get the child out of that state before they can learn anything or take anything in, because you're in emergency mode. You're shutting down in order to get through the moment. Okay? So, with that being said, children want to go, or adults we want to be in a state of predictability, because when we're in a state of uncertainty, the brain is receiving signals of foreign, unknown, and so we go into one of these reactions. So when a child or an adult has grown up in a setting that is unsafe, unstable, what they're going to do is, when you're in a stable, safe environment, you want to go back. They want to go back to the unsafe, unstable, because that has become normal. So that's where it gets a little tricky. So as educators, we need to transition out of that being the normal. How do we get them from that being their normal to safe environments being normal? So this looks like trauma being a form of disembodiment, right? So we're not grounded in our being able to identify our emotions and regulate them. I'm going to go quickly to how this applies to generational collective trauma. So whole people groups can be traumatized. If you think about First Nations, Native American genocide, it's actually scientifically proven that trauma can be transferred from generation to generation. They did a study on rats, and these rats were exposed to a sound and then shocked after that sound. And so then the rats were conditioned to have this fear response to this sound. And when they had children, the baby rats had never heard the sound, but when they heard that sound, they had the same response as their parents. So this study was done by an atheist, and he quotes the Bible saying, they were onto something here when they're talking about generational curses and blessings. It's actually scientifically proven. So the reverse is true too. You can generationally pass on good things to your children. So that's a quick side note. And we are running out of time. So I'm going to go quickly to some applications. Support child development and education and family support. As we just said, this is generational. And so if parents haven't gotten healing, they're going to pass it on to their kids. So it's really important as educators to support family development. Form attachments, give hugs, give eye contact. It's super important. Limit technology. This is actually connects with dissociation. So it's a way of escape when technology can be another world that we just enter into. If you just look at how we all have our phones, and I don't really know what to say, so I'm just gonna look at my phone, right? So it seems a little counterintuitive, but with traumatized individuals, it's important. I am out of time, so I will let you kind of read those. But to conclude, the most important thing that you can do with traumatized individuals is to form relationships. Face-to-face, soul-to-soul contact is a buffer against the raging seas of inner turmoil. It is what helps you calm any emotional turbulence. We need to connect, and we need to love each other deeply, and we need to know each other on a deeper level than just student to child, language helper to adult. We have to get beyond the surface. Thank you.
So I wanted to leave some time at the end to, as we've been gathering information and have been learning about these things, I wanted to make sure Emmy was included with her work, because as we work with new neighbors, it's critically important that we have understanding to where they're coming from and who they are before jumping into English, right? And making that a safe environment. So wanted to bring this to you, and if you're in a situation and you want to start out, you have some neighbors and you'd like to greet them, I have some ways and some tips and things of how to do that, and you're welcome to contact me anytime for that. And like Anna said, we're working on a book that we're finishing that will be in there, and it's really designed for churches and communities that want to go into this work. I think we're really fortunate here at Bethel University that we do have opportunities for our students to have some of these experiences. And I continue to think about the more that we know and understand about our new neighbors as future nurses, as teachers in business, I think the better we'll be able to make relationships and share the love of Christ and welcome them here to their new home. So we have saved some time for your questions. Anything additional that you'd like to?
Sarah, can you talk a little bit about the challenge of language acquisition for older learners? Because obviously as one gets older, it becomes more difficult to learn a new language. How do you deal with that?
Sure. Well, actually, the key thing to remember with older, and what do you mean by older learners? Like beyond high school, or as we get older and older.
Open to you.
The latest, greatest
I'm
research.
an older learner. How about that?
The latest and greatest research shows that it's never too late to start learning another language, and the majority of people say, "Oh, the earlier the better." Okay, and there are definite benefits to learning young because you have more time to learn it. But as an older learner, you have a lot that younger learners don't have. You have a good knowledge of your first language, which you can transfer to your second, but you also have a lot of background knowledge and lived experiences that you can also translate as you're learning that second language to better understand. So anytime and every time is good. The one difference for teachers or anyone working with older learners is that in K-12, we really look at content areas and helping kids get up to steam with being able to graduate and have that. With adults and older learners, and I see this mistaken in some community programs, they'll start with elementary kinds of ideas, but with older learners or adults, we really need to look at where are you at? Where are your immediate needs? In my research, a woman said, she came to English class and she said, I just want to know how to say, turn off the machine, my sleeve is caught. She said, I don't want to lose my arm. And that's what she needed that night. And so that's what we kind of, want to be able to provide and have that flexibility and move away from, and repeat, the. It's where are you at, who are you, and what do you need is where we begin.
Do you have any relationship with the Minnesota Literacy Council?
Yes.
I'm asking that because that's what I've been doing since I retired. And it's very interesting now. It's clearly secular. It's not, most of my students, I taught last night, and in the room there were only 3 students who were Muslim. And they do take time off for prayer and so forth. But I think it'd be good for Bethel students to teach in environments where, one of the things I've noticed is that their goal isn't just to learn language. Most of the students I have, they have goals like taking the GED, going to college,
Yes.
and learning the language is just step number 1.
Right, exactly. And helping them with those resources. We do send a lot of students to the Rondo Library. That's a secular environment for them. It's a nice way to volunteer because they have opportunities almost any day or weekend for students to volunteer. With the Minnesota Literacy Council, one thing that I appreciate, maybe you found as well, is they have a lot of online opportunities and training opportunities that you can access for in-service teachers and volunteers. Are you motivated? Are you ready to get out and meet some new neighbors? I highly recommend it. It'll be one of the best experiences of your life. Thank you very much for coming.